bad borrowers from good borrowers in order to let good borrowers benefit from cheaper lending rates. But has this been the case? I'm now joined by Jared Getenga, the Chief Executive Officer of the Credit Information Sharing Association of Kenya, and Sam Omukoko, the Chief Executive Officer of Metropole East Africa. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on the Citizen Business Center tonight. Quite a lot of comments coming in, and we'd like to start by including two messages that have come through our Twitter handle. There we have at Kene, you say, I was blacklisted for failing to pay Mshwari. What is the penalty? And that's just one of the questions. And Dennis Kimani, you say, how can one know if I am blacklisted? Perhaps you can start with those two questions. The gentleman who has been blacklisted because of Mshwari, what can he do?
Well, to begin with, actually nobody gets blacklisted. I think it's a perception about terminology that we should begin to overcome. What happens is that when there is a status of your account, performing or non-performing, it's updated. And so when an Mshwari account is in default, that status gets put on the bureau. When it is repaid, that gets put on the bureau. And so it's a continuous upgrade, update of one's account. So what does he need to do? If there is a negative listing and they pay up, that gets updated.
So how does one get to know their credit status? Omukoko.
As it is now, the law provides that anybody who has a profile on the credit bureau is entitled to one free credit report. And therefore, if they know the office of any of the bureaus, they can walk to those offices and actually get their credit report. At Metropole, what we have done is that we have made it easy for people to access their credit report through the mobile phone. We have given them the access codes of *433#. Once you register, then you automatically will get your free credit report.
And what is contained in this credit report?
Credit report basically will contain your identification details. That's your name, your ID, date of birth. It will contain your contact details, residential address, postal address, and it will contain credit information, which has then been provided by credit providers where you have accessed credit. It may also contain additional information like court information if you had a case relating to unpayment of debt or any contracts that may not have been fulfilled that may lead to things like bankruptcy. So that information would also appear in the report.
For those who might not understand exactly how credit referencing works, perhaps Getenga, you can explain to us in brief and specifically why somebody should pay attention to their credit score.
Yeah, what happens in credit referencing is that bureaus are licensed by the Central Bank of Kenya. One of them is Metropole that is here with us. There are three. And then lenders are required to submit monthly information to the credit bureau regarding the status of the performing or non-performing of the account. That information is collated by the bureau because they will get it from different banks, different lenders. They match that information and create a profile on an individual borrower. So the bureaus are experts at this. They go beyond the ordinary sources of information. They can even go to the court records, get court judgments, and using different algorithms, they create a score on that account. So what it will typically then contain is a sum total of one's borrowing across the credit market. It will show the trend of repayment. It will also show a score. And what's the importance of that? Obviously, when you try to access credit subsequently, the new lender will refer to the credit bureau, assess what your general culture of repaying a debt is like, and use that information to determine how to deal with you for future borrowing. So they may then decide, oh, because your score is very good, we should make a very quick decision and grant you credit. If there are hesitations arising from a poor score, then they should be able to say perhaps the terms of lending here need to be a little stricter because you have a history of non-repayment.
All right.
That's how it works.
Would you say that credit referencing has worked? I mean, the reason this was set up is so that those who are good borrowers actually benefit, from negotiating with the lenders for better rates based on their credit score. Has it worked?
Yes, I would say that it has worked, but you've got to look at it from two perspectives: from the perspective of the lender and the perspective of the borrower, and the mechanism that started the whole credit referencing. Initially, when the law was passed, it only mandated banks to share negative information. So what used to go to the bureau was default information. So as a customer, as a borrower, you are prompted about the bureau because you had defaulted. When you go to the bank and the bank tells you you cannot access additional credit, it's because you have a default. But that changed when banks were mandated through a revision of the regulations to now share full information of the customer, which means that information relating to your credit will all come to the bureau, whether it's good or it's bad. What the bureaus then have done is that they have been able to build credit profiles that now reflect the true credit status of the customer. So initially, banks benefited by being able to weed out what you call serial defaulters, people who are moving from one bank to another, leaving a trail of debts behind. They are also able to collect quite a bit of what was outstanding. But where we are now is that we are focusing on the borrower, that if I have a good credit history, can I get rewarded for that? And the conversation that is now in the market is that we need to see banks rewarding people who have good credit scores. All
right. But word out there is that, banks are not actually rewarding people who have good credit scores. It doesn't matter if you come, with your credit report from the bureaus. They say this is the interest rate and this is what, you're taking your loan at. So, and just coming off from what the central bank governor said yesterday, because he seemed to insinuate that referencing is not working.
I think the banks now have an opportunity to take advantage of the framework as it is today, without having the central bank demand and instruct them. And that opportunity is available now. I'm sure the central bank is observing, because it's not something, risk management is not something that a regulator should require that now if the score is 900, please give them at 10%. It's market forces. I'm confident that the banks are going to take advantage of this as time goes on, and if there is any significant reluctance, I believe that the regulator is going to try and shape the market.
And of course, critics say banks sometimes have to be forced to do it. I mean, look at KBRR and the fact that nothing happened to it. Let's look at some of the issues that Kenyans are raising, and they're saying information such as paying of bills. Does this come into rating somebody's credit score?
The current regulation as it stands today has allowed non-regulated credit providers to join the information sharing mechanism. So you're talking about SACCOs, microfinance institutions, utilities, and other trade credit providers. When these come on board, they also share credit data as pertains to the customer's account. And therefore, it's at the point that they have joined the mechanism and submit data that then that goes into the customer's profile. So what the bureaus are doing together with the CIS Kenya is to be able to see how can we get more credit providers to come into the credit information sharing. That will also be able to give us a much better view of the customer's credit behavior, other than just focusing on what is in the banking sector only.
So who does this affect? Is it only people who borrow from, large financial institutions such as the banks, or, are there SACCOs as well? Who is affected by credit referencing?
It's a growing environment. At the moment, all banks and all microfinance banks are participants in the system. But SACCOs are coming in, one by one. They're not coming in en masse. And so it's growing. Other non-banks, microfinance institutions that are not licensed by the central bank are also joining the mechanism. So it's a gradual increase. The numbers are just growing gradually. We have some alternative credit providers who have joined the mechanism. And so with time, we see it growing so that all microfinance institutions, all circles will get into the system.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if one has been blacklisted, and I know you said we shouldn't use that word, so if somebody has a bad credit score, how long does it take, you know, what is the recourse like? How long does it take for them to get back a good credit record?
Okay, you have a bad credit score because you have a default item on your profile. And when you pay off that particular item, the lender would then update your record. But according to the current regulations, is that that item then still remains on your profile for a period of 5 years. It will show as a historical item, but it will not.
So, but does that mean for 5 years one will not be able to access any lending, or might just get it at a higher price than?
Yeah, what it means is that it's an indication of a historical incident, that at some point you had a default item. But when the lender is now looking at you today with your account in good shape, they may want to take that into account, or they may ignore it totally. The credit score that will appear on your report will not reflect that information, that past information, if it has been there for a long time. And that's why we're saying that if you have been blacklisted, it is not that you are condemned, that you will not get credit. What you need to do is to struggle and pay up the item and make sure that you start rebuilding your credit profile again.
All right. Well, I want us to look at some of the tweets coming in, but just before we do that, there was a court case, I think about a year ago, where a businessman went to court and tried to sue a bank, saying that he was a guarantor of somebody who took a loan and he wasn't the defaulter himself. How is a person like that ordinarily treated?
Well, a guarantor exposes himself or herself to a credit risk. And I mean, if it is properly documented, your guarantee relationship, it means that if that loan is not paid, you are guaranteeing that you will pay it. And so when there is a guarantor relationship for a default account, it does reduce you know, your risk. I mean, it increases your risk as a potentially bad debtor. So it is appropriate for us to know that when you guarantee, you should be part of encouraging repayment of that loan. Otherwise, it does affect your score.
All right. Let's take one question that's coming through from our Twitter platforms. And David Dio, all right, Kisemwa Karisa, you say, I've never taken a bank loan, but apparently I am listed. What do I do? Sam?
People get surprised that they are on the credit bureau with what would appear as a default item. Maybe you had an account that you forgot and the bank continued to apply charges and you're not aware. And what the banks were doing is that then they would forward that particular account to the bureau. And if you have not checked your credit report, you might go out seeking for credit, and then you get surprised that you actually have a negative item on your bureau. So that's part of the reason that we do always advise that as much as you can, try and see what is on your credit report before you engage a lender.
All right, we really have to wind up now. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for shedding light on this situation that clearly Kenyans needed a lot of understanding on. Jared Getenga, the Chief Executive Officer of the Credit Information Sharing Association, and Sam Omukoko, the Chief Executive Officer at Metropole East Africa. Thank you so much, both gentlemen, for joining us tonight. Well, Citizen Business Center takes a short break now. We'll be back with more right after this break.